Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is SilverDollarSam, and today we're going to be talking about why Bitcoin is money. Many people say that Bitcoin is just a new asset class and not money, but today I will make the argument as towards why Bitcoin is money. It is cash. It is a hard form of cash. So let's begin. To understand money, we must first understand what money once was, what money still is. Gold and silver, the first money. At the top here, you can see this is a Spanish silver dollar, whereas in the bottom, you could see this is a United States gold dollar from 1849. Okay, so if you ask the question, what is money? Well, money must be durable. Unlike these bottle caps that have oxidized, money must be able to last for a long period of time without corrosion. Money also must be divisible. Unlike this mansion here, I can't pay for my Starbucks with 1/10 of my swimming pool. Okay, additionally, money must also be rare or valuable, right? And it must be fungible, right? So one gold coin equals one gold coin always, right? I hesitate with rare and valuable because we'll get there. But yeah, to the next point is that money has innate properties. Okay, so what you see here is a periodic table. Now, if you exclude every metal that can corrode easily, okay, I'm talking about iron, that is difficult to smelt, okay, I'm looking at titanium, that is liquid at room temperature, okay, obviously we're looking at mercury in that one, or too scarce in nature, which are many, then essentially the most notable and most available atoms in the universe to be used would be silver and gold. Okay, so silver and gold are natural money. They have been money for thousands of years. They have been stores of value and medium of exchange for thousands of years. Okay, so next, let's talk a little bit further in depth about gold and silver. So what makes gold and silver valuable? Okay, well, the supply of gold and silver is determined by production, not by the government. So look at these gentlemen here, right? Okay, so these folks, if you want them to go and get you some gold, you have to employ them. You have to give them 20 shovels, 20 pickaxes, etc. And they have to go into nature where it is rare. You have to know where there already is gold, right? It is labor and equipment intensive. And that's the point, is that production incurs costs, right? So it literally, in this case, costs money to make money. Okay, so next, let's talk about the benefits of silver and gold coinage. So first of all, self-custody. Okay, you have gold in your pocket. That is your money. Okay, you own it. Nobody else controls it but you. If you lose it, sorry, you lost it, but it's your money. Okay, and it is not controlled by the government. It is not controlled by a trusted intermediary, i.e. a bank, right? And so take a look at this, right? So Spanish silver dollars are the first, very, very first form of currency in the United States. They're still valuable. They're still money. Okay. U.S. silver dollars were pegged on a one-to-one basis with Spanish silver dollars. Okay. And funny enough, they're still valuable and they're still money because the truth holds that silver and gold cost money to produce. Okay. They are rare in nature. They have natural elements. They have been money for thousands of years. And it doesn't matter that the Spanish government printed this symbol on this coin because this coin is still silver. And it doesn't matter that the U.S. government printed XYZ on this coin because this coin is still gold. Okay? And that's a benefit to gold and silver coinage. So, next, let's talk about gold and silver coinage specie laws. Okay? So let's just quickly brush over this. So first of all, the first Coinage Act of 1972, or of 1792, excuse me, was when the U.S. dollar was created. It was then pegged to the value of the Spanish silver dollar. If you recall from world history, the Spanish in South America were creating a lot of silver. Okay, and these silver Spanish dollars were very prevalent in the New World. Okay, let's just focus on the points that have underlying layers here. So the Coinage Act of 1857 ends the status of foreign coins as legal tender. Okay, think about that for a moment. Everybody knows that a Spanish silver dollar is worth its weight in silver. Okay, but the government is trying to tell you, no, because it has some fancy silver coinage on it, it is not legal tender. You have to turn it in, and we will smelt it into U.S. silver dollars. Okay. All right, thanks, Dad. So in the Coinage Act of 1873, it ends the rights of silver bullion holders to convert their silver bullion into silver dollars. Remember, you used to be able to go to a U.S. mint with a silver bullion and say, hey, please make these into silver dollars for me. because I already have this money and I want you to make it into coinage that I can use and spend. Okay, and then basically, far, far in the future, in 1965, the Coinage Act then debases silver from today's coinage, basically, of which it's purely eliminated in 1970 some odd. So that's the history of gold and silver coinage, and let's turn to paper notes and their legality. Because we think about money today, right? They're paper notes, okay? I'm not going to give an opinion on this, right? But let's just note from Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, it explicitly forbids states from issuing bills of credit or making anything but gold and silver legal, right? So let's talk about this for a moment. I quote, "No state shall, blah, 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 coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender of payment of debts." Okay? Now, no personal opinion on that, but I just want to note it. Not many people think about this, that the Constitution literally says we can't make paper notes, and here we are. So, let's move on. I just need to note that before we talk about banks, okay? What are banks, okay? Now, banks are obviously a little bit more complicated than this. We're going to get into those complications, okay? But in essence, with all the jargon, trust us with your gold and your silver, and we will give you a paper receipt, okay? And even though we hold that gold and silver, it's yours, trust me. We'll give you this piece of paper, okay? That is what banks do, essentially. And it is, in my opinion, the original sin. Okay? Examples of banks would be the U.S. Treasury, albeit they, call themselves a treasury. Whatever. They hold gold. To me, gold is money. That's a bank. Okay? The Federal Reserve came along a lot later in the United States history. But the Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States. And then we're going to talk about private banks. We're going to talk about all of it. Before we talk about banks, let's talk about one of the big impacts the banks have, okay? And banks do something very fun. Banks create paper notes, okay? So let's just break this down here for a quick moment. The first paper note, at least in the United States, the first form of paper currency, although not intended for exchange between individuals, right, are treasury notes, bonds, bills, etc. This is government debt, okay? Now, really quick, have you already noticed the problem? Right? In the United States, silver Spanish dollars were legal tender from the Coinage Act of 1792. So the government comes in and they say, hey, look, I need $10,000, but I do not have the Spanish silver dollars for that. So I'm going to give you this piece of paper, okay? And this is an IOU, all right? Think about that for a quick moment. Next, we have national bank notes. This is a common form of currency prior to the Civil War in the United States, right? It's most often backed by bonds. So a national bank note is basically your bank just gives you a receipt. It's not like a dollar. It's just like if you have the bank of John Doe John, then they'll give you a John Doe John buck, okay? And remember, this is an IOU from your bank because of money you've deposited in your bank, and that IOU is backed by bonds, which in a sense is another IOU for money that hasn't, been acquired by the government just yet. Do you see the problem here? Do you see the problem here? Okay, I'm going to continue. Let's talk about general currency as we know it. The first currency we saw that could be analogous to the currency we have today are greenbacks and demand notes. These were emergency Civil War money, unredeemable for gold or silver, albeit they said dollar on them. Think about that for a second. You've got a gold or silver coin, a gold or silver dollar, and they're supposed to tell you that this piece of paper equals what you have in gold. Well, I would disagree with that. But they won't give you the gold for that piece of paper. Very interesting. Okay. So then we're going to talk about the United States note, which followed very shortly after, the year after the greenbacks and demand notes, right? This is under the first legal tender act of 1862, and it creates a fiat currency that, once again, is unredeemable for gold or silver. Okay. So then we return to gold, as you'll come to see, because gold is great. So they say, hey, the Contraction Act of 1866, we're going to get rid of all this garbage and return to the gold standard, none of this redeemable, non-redeemable stuff. Okay. Then you have followed that up by the Specie Payment Resumption Act of 1875, which allows the redemption of gold for previously unredeemable United States notes. Okay. So remember, you recall these United States notes, they're unredeemable for gold, but they are $1 worth the same as the gold dollar that you hold in the bank, okay? That's unfair. So they said, you know what? We got to make sure that these things can be redeemable for gold, because gold is money. And what are these notes if not to represent gold? Okay. So then you see, much further in the future, the Federal Reserve come along in 1913, right? So the modern Federal Reserve notes are created that we use today. Okay. The Federal Reserve, remember, is the central bank of the United States. So part of the rules of the Federal Reserve Act is the Federal Reserve must hold gold equal to 40% of the value of the currency it has. Okay. Well, at least any Federal Reserve note is backed by hard, cold cash, i.e. gold. Okay. In turn, through history, we created something very important, the Bretton Woods system. In 1944, in the depths of World War II, there was a conference in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. And because the United States dollar was backed by gold, because the Federal Reserve, in its infinite wisdom, held money based on gold assets, right? We all came together as a globe and decided, you know what? 35 US dollars equals 1 troy ounce of gold. And this creates an international gold standard. All currencies are pegged to the US dollar because the US dollar is as good as hard cash. It's as good as gold. And in turn, the US benefits because all international balances are settled in dollars. Whoop-de-doo. Well, unfortunately, there are a bit of problems with this. Remember what we were talking about with the first banknotes, okay? It is an IOU of an IOU. Well, the nature of having a bank and the issue with having cold, hard cash that you then tokenize into a, little note, a little bank note, is the fact that, unfortunately, at one point, people are going to want to redeem that gold. And the United States did not have the gold. We had printed too many dollars. In August 15th of 1971, President Nixon ends the convertibility of U.S. dollars to gold. This is followed by the Smithsonian Agreement of 1971, in which currencies of industrialized nations were pegged to the United States dollar, again benefiting the United States. But here is the impact, folks. The main impact you can see here, all currencies suddenly become unbacked. All currencies suddenly become a float. They have no intrinsic value other than the fact that you can exchange them and people will accept them. But they do not cost money to make. They don't have inherent value. And only the government has the ability to make them. All right. So what we can see here and in the years that follows, remember, President Nixon ended the convertibility of gold in 1971? So here's the 1970s. And as you can see, we see just a huge increase in price. Yeah, well, when you don't have to lend based off of a hard asset that is rare in value, you can lend no matter what. You can print dollars into infinity. So this brings us to the Federal Reserve. Okay, let's talk about the Federal Reserve. They're the central bank of the United States. What do they do? Okay, what does the Federal Reserve do? Well, let's talk about some established facts. Money is now strictly paper, okay? At this point in time, money has no intrinsic value except for what the government tells you and what people are willing to accept for it, okay? So money is literally paper, and the Federal Reserve holds the only authorized printer of that paper, okay? So you might ask a very astute question. How does the Federal Reserve print money? Well, the Federal Reserve sets the federal funds rate, okay? And this is essentially the interest rate for credit, okay? So on the right here, let's just take a moment. On the right, you can see in blue is the federal funds rate, in green is the 10-year T-bill, and in red is the 1-year T-bill, okay? They all tend to follow in tandem. Okay, let's take a look at another form of debt. Okay, so here is the market yield in the 10-year Treasury, which we know follows to a certain extent at least the federal funds rate. And in red, we see the 30-year rate fixed mortgage. It's a little bit small for you to see if you're on a phone. But yeah, essentially, this federal funds rate sets the cost of credit. What is the price to loan to somebody? And so what we see here, here's the impact, okay? When rates are low, when the federal fund rate, which is set by the Federal Reserve, is low, credit is free. I can take $100 and there's no extra charge for taking that line of credit other than paying that line of credit back. They don't charge me 5%, 10%, 20%. There is no fee. It is free, okay? And then more loans equals more dollars printed, okay? So hey, if everybody could just get access to a loan, a mortgage, right, for a home that when calculated for inflation is free, okay, then everybody would start taking as much money as they can and buying homes. I wonder when we've seen that before, okay? And what is the impact when rates are high? Well, when rates are high, credit is expensive. There are less loans that are given and less dollars that are printed in turn. So when we are saying the Federal Reserve is printing money, we mean that more loans are being created and therefore more money is being created, because that is all a dollar is. It is just a arbitrary loan that is created out of thin air. Okay. So let's move on real quick here. I just wanted to denote this is the federal funds rate since 60. Okay. And what we can see here is shortly after the dot-com bubble, we've gone down to near zero levels in the federal funds rate. We had a little pipe up here in 2008, and since 2010, it has been easy sailing, easy money, baby. The cost of getting credit has been free, absolutely free. So let's also take a look really quick as well at the M1 money supply. What is the M1 money supply? This is cash, etc., cash equivalents. Okay. So what we can see is, well, when the federal funds rate is low, right, and more loans are created, there is more money that is created, and that's the money supply. The M2 money supply, same thing. Okay, it's just checkings, savings accounts, etc. Okay, so as we continue to create more and more loans, the money supply increases. Okay. So, in essence, what I'm trying to communicate here is dollars are garbage, man. Dollars can be created endlessly. They have no inherent value. Okay. Dollars over time, right, devalue because the supply can increase indefinitely. Remember gold, right? Gold, the value, the supply of gold can't increase indefinitely over time. You have to produce more gold, and it costs money to produce gold, okay? Whereas dollars, the bank can decide the federal funds rate is zero permanently, print to infinity, and then, you know, one Bitcoin will be worth $2 bajillion, right? So anyways, there is one central government authority that decides the price of credit, therefore deciding the supply of dollars, of which the supply of dollars is constantly increasing because they constantly want the credit to be cheap. Okay? Banks monopolize the custody of dollars. So you can only self-custody cash bills. Remember we were talking about gold, you can self-custody it. Sure, it takes costs. You might need to have a safe, right? You might need to have a gun if you're in the Wild West to be able to protect the gold that's yours, right? But you can self-custody it. Now today, sure, you could take your entire net worth out and store it in your house as cash, right? But remember, cash is not gold. And, you know, if you spill water on it, or if there's a fire, or if there's an emergency, right, you will lose that money, okay? So if you want to transmit a large amount of money, banks monopolize your ability to use money. Right? If I want to transact between me and John, and I live in Washington and John lives in Idaho, I have to use a bank. I have to send him money through my bank. If I Venmo, Cash App him, eventually, at one point, it goes from my bank to his bank. All right? So banks monopolize the custody of dollars. They monopolize the payment of dollars. And dollars are trash. They're not worth anything. So dollars are money, sure. But like, are dollars valuable? Are dollars rare? Not really. So what's the alternative? Okay, well, you know what I'm going to say. The alternative is Bitcoin. Here's a couple quick properties of Bitcoin, and then we'll break it down a little bit further. Okay, so Bitcoin has a limited supply. There will only be 21 million Bitcoins ever created. Bitcoin is cost intensive. As of December the 22nd, one Bitcoin cost $18,800 to create. Bitcoin is durable, right? It has a decentralized consensus mechanism that produces a public blockchain verified independently by every node on the network. And every node on the network is an individual actor treated the same. It is fungible. One Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. It's divisible. You can divide it into as many sats as you like, right? And it's peer-to-peer, eliminating any use for banks. This is the most important point here, folks. It is peer to peer. Think about that. If you buy something on eBay, if you buy something on Amazon, you got to use dollars, right? You have to go through a bank. That transaction at one point hits a balance or a ledger on your bank's books, right? But Bitcoin is the first digital payment system in the history of the world where you can pay peer to peer without trusting a single centralized institution like a bank. Pretty freaking cool. At least that's what I think about it. Okay, so really quickly, let's talk about some qualities of Bitcoin so that people can understand what this technology does. Most of you probably know what this technology is, but it's always amazing to talk about the technology behind this product. So let's talk about identity, and then we'll talk about transactions. We're going to talk about cryptography, private key cryptography more particularly. So for identity, users access their wallet using private keys. Okay, think your seed phrases, right? So this is pure self-control, pure custody. Okay, let's talk about private keys for a quick moment here, right? So private keys derive from public private key cryptography. Okay, very simple, right? So Bob wants to send Alice an encrypted message that only Alice can read. So Bob takes Alice's public key, because Alice has a public key and a private key. Only Alice knows her private key, but everybody knows Alice's public key. So Bob, he wants to make this message and he wants only Alice to read it. He takes Alice's public key and he encrypts the message with Alice's public key. And then Alice, who is the only holder of Alice's private key, can decrypt that message, okay? And then through some variation of this, we can also send messages, whether you want them encrypted or not, and we can sign them so that you always know that that message came from Alice 100%, okay? And so this works very similar to the identity on Bitcoin, right? Those seed phrases, those private keys, right? That is your key to your coins. Okay, so additionally, right, users receive funds generating public addresses. Everybody knows your public address, right? And so I'm able to look at your public address and send you money because of that. So, and then lastly, coins are a chain of digital signatures from one user to the next. Now, most people don't go that in depth, but every single coin is signed with the previous hash or the transaction of the previous hash, right? And so it is a chain of digital signatures that transfer that coin from one user to another to another. So every coin has its own encryption or, digital signature details, basically. So Bitcoin is a public ledger. Okay, so look at this up here, up top, right? So this up here is a ledger, right? Alice pays Bob Bitcoin, 1 Bitcoin. I said Bitcoin pays Charlie 1 Bitcoin. Good God, I was tired there. Charlie pays David 1 Bitcoin. Okay, so yeah, essentially it's a ledger, right, that basically says who pays who, and that is what a ledger is. So Bitcoin is a decentralized ledger, and every node on the network holds this ledger, right? Let's look at this gentleman here who's setting up his Bitcoin miners, and they all hold this ledger and independently verify that ledger. Okay, let me move myself out of the way if you want to see this guy right here with his beautiful Bitcoin miners. Okay, so Bitcoin's a public ledger. Everybody has a copy of this ledger and independently verifies this ledger. Okay, so then let's talk about Bitcoin as a decentralized network, okay? Well, Bitcoin is a permissionless network where any node, otherwise known as a miner, can begin verifying blocks and attempting to propose blocks, okay? So all nodes are equal, right? So one CPU equals one vote. Let's think about it this way really quick. So this is from the network portion of the Bitcoin white paper. So for every node in the network, new transactions are broadcasted, right? Each node collects new transactions into a block. Each node works on finding a difficult proof of work for its block. When a node finds a proof of work, it broadcasts the block to all nodes, okay? So Bitcoin is a decentralized network. It is peer-to-peer. You do not need to trust any central organization. You just need to trust that your Bitcoin transactions are decentralized, right? So, with that being said, how are all nodes equal? How is it one CPU versus one vote, right? Well, this is because of a consensus algorithm known as proof of work, right? So proof of work is a process of validating groups of transactions, otherwise known as blocks, on a blockchain. So you can actually see up here, this is a snippet from the Bitcoin white paper as well. So you have here is this block, and here's the previous hash, a nonce, your transactions, etc. Okay, so basically, as the Bitcoin white paper describes proof of work, it is a timestamp transactions hashed on an ongoing chain of hash-based proof of work. What the heck does that mean? Okay, basically, every miner is competing to calculate a SHA-256 value, which serves as the timestamp of the next block. Okay, and it's a race, right? For those of you who don't know what SHA-256 is, SHA-256 is an algorithm that allows you to take a value, any value, and turn it into 256 bits, right? So take, for example, right here, Fox, you put it into the SHA-256 hashing algorithm, and it becomes this, right? The red fox runs across the ice, right? Much longer sentence, but you still put it through the hash function, and it becomes this, right? Similar length, right? The same, combination of letter, or not the same combination, but the same setup here of numbers and letters, right? And you have a different sentence. The red fox walks across the ice. You throw it into this hash function, completely different, okay? So every miner is competing to calculate a SHA-256 value, which serves as the timestamp. If you are the lucky miner that proposes the next block of transactions, you win a reward. And all other miners verify this block of transactions, right? So you are fighting with your CPU computing power to be able to do the work to propose the next block of transactions. And every miner that comes after you and verifies the work that you've done, they're able to verify independently that you have proposed a block that is valid, that does not take money from places where it does not have, where there are wallets that don't have money, right? So this is proof of work. It's a process of validating groups of transactions on a blockchain, okay? And now let's talk about the economics of Bitcoin, okay? A lot of people don't know this, surprisingly. There are only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist ever. The supply cap will actually be reached in 2140. Now, every 4 years, the inflation reward of miners is cut in half. Look at this. Every 4 years, right? So we started at 30%, went down to 15%-ish, ish. Then we went down to 7%-ish, right? That's the inflation rate. So every 4 years, the inflation rate is cut in half. This is because the difficulty to mine increases. Basically, you get half the amount of reward for the same amount of work, okay? So CPU, time, and electricity incurs costs, right? Remember, a cost of mining one Bitcoin is $18,800 in December of 2022. So it is expensive to mine Bitcoin. Bitcoin is limited in supply, okay? And every 4 years, the inflation of Bitcoin continues to go down because Bitcoin mining becomes more difficult, okay? So returning to the ultimate question, why is Bitcoin money? Well, Bitcoin is a system for electronic transactions without relying on trust, okay? There is no bank necessary. Banks are the original sin. Remember, think about what banks were doing, right? They're taking IOUs, essentially the government debt, right? And then they're issuing their own IOUs for gold and silver that doesn't exist, right? That's what they used to do back in the day. So you, the hardworking citizen, you deposit your gold, right? And that gold gets caught up in this feeding frenzy. You give the bank your gold, something really valuable, something really worthwhile, and they give you this paper crap, okay? And then today, basically, banks just create IOUs of IOUs of IOUs. Because remember, the dollars of today are not backed by anything, right? What does a dollar represent? A dollar just represents debt. What is that debt? Who knows? It's just created out of thin air, right? The Federal Reserve says, hey, you need a loan. You are able to take this loan at this rate. Here's the loan. And dollars are created out of thin air, right? They're the only ones with an authorized printer. So banks have a monopoly over the facility of payments, right? Bitcoin is the first payment system not reliant on a trusted institution like a bank. It's peer-to-peer. When I pay you, we work with a protocol that is decentralized, where every node is equal and peer-to-peer and verifies transactions together. So anyone can hold, accept, or pay in Bitcoin. Okay? It is permissionless. There is no need to have a social security number. There is no need to have an identity. You can create a Bitcoin address immediately with no sign up period and accept Bitcoin today, this second. So that's why Bitcoin is money. And I want to leave you with the very last thing here, the Genesis block. The chancellor is on the brink of the second bailout for banks. Why do we have banks? We live in a world today where value can be transacted without a trusted intermediary. And I personally believe that the most ultimate form of hard cash is one that only the holders of this currency can control. Thank you very much for coming to this presentation, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Like, subscribe, and drop me a comment below. Bye-bye now.